everyone in this room can understand the genius that is Natalie Portman, and I've been a fan for a very long time. When I first found out that I actually booked it, my friends were like, what? You gonna be next to her? And then when I met her, they were like, how did you do? Did you do okay? You know, it's always amazing, right? It's like people like Natalie. She didn't know me at first, right? But I had spent so many nights watching her, you know what I mean? And so to somehow finesse my way inside the TV next to Natalie Portman really is so surreal. And I feel like every few minutes, I remind myself to try to be as present as I can, because that's Natalie Portman sitting next to me.
Thank you all so much for being here. Alma, I want to start with you. There are many things I love about this series, and one of them was the way that you just intertwine these stories and these themes of secrets and freedom and violence and history, and there's so much. So I'm curious, when you were embarking on this journey, what was the tone you were going for? What was your vision?
Yeah, I think, reading the book, if I'm sure some people read it, it's the best-selling book of Laura Lippman, and been an honor to obviously get to work on it. There was a lot of different perspectives of people telling the story, and I was kind of very much in love with the twisted Maddie Morgenstern. But also felt like I wanted to, really understand much more about who Cleo is. Sherwood at the book, Johnson in our show, because I married her to Slappy Dark Johnson, the great Byron Bowers over there. So first of all, our first mission when I met Natalie, who is also a producer and EP on the show, was we both agreed right away that the first thing we want to do is to kind of create that two-hander, and make sure that we make that world bigger. And then as I researched their world and got into it and discovered all this, wonderful culture and many things that people didn't know, or I didn't know, I should say, about Baltimore, the idea was to, have this kind of feeling of motion, constant motion, almost like you're like a pinball in a pinball machine, kind of, going around Baltimore and kind of slowly realizing how everything is interconnected. So I think that was the idea.
Natalie, when you were exploring Maddie and figuring out who she was, she carries so much in her. There's so much rage and sadness and shame and ambition and intelligence. And what was the thing that drew you to her?
Thank you for saying that. I was so drawn to her because I think, like almost every woman's story, it's a story about someone trying to get free. And she has this very particular set of circumstances that made me think a lot about my own grandmother, who was in her 40s in the same era. And I always find it so internally revelatory to explore my own mother's interior, my own grandmother's interior. It's such a understanding of where you come from, even though my grandmother's very different than Maddie, obviously.
Moses, I wanted to ask you specifically about one scene that we all just saw, because I think it just speaks so much to who Cleo is. And she's sitting opposite Myrtle, and Myrtle wants her to basically work for free, can keep going. And she says, you'll have opportunities. And she says, opportunities for what? To surrender my dignity. And it's such a powerful moment. And to me, it says so much about who Cleo is, because even in a society that tells her that she's not worth anything. She knows her worth on such a profound level. So tell me about, was that something that drew you to her?
I think Cleo reminds me of a lot of women that I've seen in my life. And so I have a lot of respect for her. There's a musical, it's called Working the Musical, and there's a song in it called If I Could Have Been. It's like, if I could have been what I could have been something. If they had just let me go where I was raring to go when I was ready to go back then, God only knows what I would have been. And I think about the young woman that Cleo was and how dreamy she was, and sometimes life can really stick it to you, you know? But she's driven by her boys, and you can feel it. It's electric, and I could feel it the first time I read it. Sometimes it's so hard to keep reading. Like, I can read 10 pages and be like, I don't know what the fuck I just read, you know? But this, I started reading, and I just couldn't stop, literally. So good from the beginning.
Elan, I don't want to spoil anything that's coming up with your character, so I'm just going to go real actory, because this is a room full of actors, and just talk about how, and any of you jump in, figuring out your characters from the outside in, and what it was like to just shoot for however many months with like those sweet sideburns.
Homegrown organic sideburns. Yeah, so for me, when I saw Ferdy, I was like, okay, this is a character that's really unwilling to compromise. He's got his integrity, and his moral compass is pretty high. I was like, okay, this is really fascinating. And to be honest, I'll follow Alma anywhere. So that's my draw, to be completely honest.
I have to imagine for all of you, I mean, the costumes, the sets, they were, when you're acting in that space, does it just make it so much easier?
100%. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I remember trying on clothes and just stepping into the era, because the clothes came from a costume place that is very authentic. So the sizes was different back in the 60s. That's the first thing I noticed, because I'm like an XL in the 60s time. And I'm like, man, they really didn't, meat was real expensive back then, wasn't it? Shit. And I started to feel bad, but the fabrics, the fabrics and the clothes had more of a artist feel to it. And it just reminded you of a time, like I'm a car guy, so I'm like, oh, everything, TV set, everything had an artistry to it. Like it was, and then most of it was made here. Which takes you to a time of what this, even though this country had problems, it still was in its growth, one of its growth periods, So,
yeah, I definitely think that it's a big credit to our costume designer Shiona and our set designer JC Molina.
Right.
Shout out to those individuals. I think they gave us an immersive type of armor in order to go into battle for what we were trying to achieve with Alma's vision, and I think that it just allowed all of us to kind of not think about the things, that were probably distracting us from what we had to do. So,
I'm curious for all of you, and Josiah, I thought about this a lot with Reggie. I was just dying to know like his backstory, and we get to see a little bit of Maddie and Cleo. We know a little bit more of like where they came from, and I was wondering, as actors, for all of you, how much you build their history before you kind of climb into a character.
I think from the origin of Reggie, he's an amalgamation type of character, like Slappy as well, but I think it's imperative as an actor when you're creating a character that you stay as specific as you can in the individuality of what you do know, and that was from our script. And I think the world that surrounds everything else kind of just lends itself to the authenticity of just an applicable action that Reggie will be doing, like smoldering down a hallway. Yeah.
Did you all read the book before? Because I know there are differences and everything, and I know that sometimes an actor will want specifically to read it, and sometimes will say no because it's a different take. It's my take and Alma's take and this cast's take, and it can be a little bit disorienting to who you're creating. So what was the process with that?
Well, I was brought the book by Jean-Marc Vallée, who we very sadly lost right before filming started, and his producing partner, Nathan Ross. They came to me with the book and came to Alma with the book and made this shidduch between us, which I'm so eternally grateful for. And so I did read the book as the first step in this process. And also, I think probably it was most valuable for my character because she's very explored in the book, and most of the other characters Alma really brought to life in the screenplay writing. So it was incredible the way that Laura made the twists and turns and wrote about the challenges specific to the time and highlighted these murders that were based on real murders, unfortunately, and the different kinds of attention paid to each of them as this sort of kernel that we jumped off from.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that I thought was so interesting and so respected about the show is there's no headline like, let's talk about racism and let's talk about sexism. It's you see it in every frame. You see it in every interaction.
Thank you.
You see it and so talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think you said it. I just was hoping for people to experience it, through the personal kind of life of the characters, as opposed to, I guess, explain to them or preach to them or tell them about it, in a way that feels educational. And also, I really wanted to, I guess, do two things. One is to show the dualism of these characters and of life itself. So kind of not put necessarily a moral price or a tag on everything and say what's wrong and what's right, and instead of it kind of see what it feels like to be a crab in a basket, or like just a lot of people in hot water trying to survive and not necessarily understanding what awareness to each other's suffering looks like. And then the second thing, I guess, was just to really try and to articulate through the visuals, like you're saying, certain things that do not need to be said in words. Sometimes can be said in a song or through a dance or through a look or just an interaction that tells you, who's got the upper hand.
Yeah, absolutely. We know from the very first few seconds from the voiceover, from Moses' voiceover, that these two women are going to have this dance and be intertwined, and you don't, with each episode you learn more and you see more. So without spoiling anything, how was it when the two of you, in whatever way, got to actually act together, since you have these parallel and sometimes intertwining stories?
It was extraordinary. I mean, I think Moses is one of the great actresses of her generation, if not the greatest actress of her generation. She's so extraordinary, and she's just, wait till you see the rest of the season. You're gonna lose your minds. It's just the honesty and the nuance and the emotion and the extreme choices that are always true. It's just really, really remarkable. And I was in awe. And with Alma, we were just like jumping, literally holding hands and jumping up and down when we saw her work for the first time. It was just the greatest gift. So there's not many scenes together, unfortunately, which we will repair in the future with another project that we get to do together. But the ones we had were very, very sacred for me.
And Moses, when you saw the two of them holding hands and jumping up and down,
I think everyone in this room can understand the genius that is Natalie Portman, and I've been a fan for a very long time. When I first found out that I actually booked it, my friends were like, what? You gonna be next to her? And then when I met her, they were like, how did you do? Did you do okay? You know, it's been an extreme pleasure of mine. I don't know how it's always amazing, right? It's like people like Natalie, she didn't know me at first, right? But I had spent so many nights watching her, you know what I mean? And so to somehow finesse my way inside the TV next to Natalie Portman really is so surreal. And I feel like every few minutes when especially in doing press, you know, because I'm one of those people who like stuff like this, like I watch on YouTube all the time. And I remind myself to try to be as present as I can because that's Natalie Portman sitting next to me. It's amazing.
Talk about it.
And can I say something about both of these? I had scenes with both of these ladies. And that's one of the thank yous that I have, because I don't know how I did, because you all allowed me to be present. And it was as if we was dancing in a rhythm, and then when it was done, it was done, and I had no recollection of what happened. You know what I mean? Until I saw it on screen, and I was like, "Fuck!" And I was like, but no, it was good. It was good. So thank y'all.
I do remember this one scene that Byron and Natalie filmed together, which I was kind of, you know, preparing. We were preparing for it, and then when it was over, I said, well, "How did it go?" And he said, "I don't know, but she let me look into her soul."
Yeah. Is that what you responded to sometimes? You know. You lost in whatever's that thing, and then when you're done, you're just like, what happened? It's like an acid trip. Y'all old enough to remember acid.
I understand that you had this like nearly 2,000-page Bible, you know, the
interactive Bible. Hey.
Interactive Bible. What was in there, and did you all get a peek in and help?
Sadly, they did, and
a
13-hour playlist of music.
Oh my gosh, seriously? Oh, okay. I want to hear about the book. I want to hear about. Did everyone get your own playlist, or was it like here's a whole thing?
Yeah, me and Alma, like, I mean, for the past 3 years almost, have just been on an exchange thread of music with each other. So from the origin of shooting to now, it's like she sent me some shit yesterday. She's like, "Send me your songs right now." I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I think, well, to go back to the interactive Bible, which a lot of credit for that is owed to J.C. Molina, our production designer, that also helped me create it with another designer we hired. Was that the idea was to use street photographers of the time that we found that had personal archives or that were working for local newspapers and weren't necessarily famous. Some of them were, but most of them weren't, and that were mostly either black or women. So we could kind of see the city from their perspective and not just digest images that were already, you know, made into films, or look at films that were made by other people that looked at fashion magazines instead of Life or whatever it is, right? So the idea was to kind of take all of these photographs, which were thousands of them, and map all of Baltimore into neighborhoods. And then you could click on each neighborhood and see what it looked like at the time through their eyes, but in relation to the locations. So it was like you could kind of watch it either through neighborhoods or location, or etc., or scenes numbers, and it was all given to all the departments. So when they dress up the sets and work on the locations, they would have like a reference and color palettes for everything. And I burdened these guys with it too. I don't know if anybody looked, but I think they kind of took a peek. And no, I know they did. And then the playlist was something that was created while I was writing it, because just kind of part of the process of writing, really getting into the era, but also tonally kind of finding these musicians. Some of them were from Baltimore, and some of them just like Nina Simone, who's just been like such a big part of what this show is for me.
I was like, man, if I hear this Nina one more time for a year, you know what I mean? It was just playing, you know.
How did you work with Natalie on just perfecting that Pikesville accent, which is quite something, and flawless? I mean, really flawless.
Thank you. That's really nice to hear. We had great dialect coaches, a few different ones who worked on it because it's such a long process. So I worked with one person before we started production, then another person for the first part, and then another person for the third part, and they were all incredible. And then we were lucky also to have an incredible crew from Baltimore. So they would be like, no, Baltimore, like Voldemort, you know? They would be like, so they would call me out.
I still hear
if there were mistakes. Yeah,
it still haunts me.
Yeah, yeah. So that was incredible to have this just extraordinary crew from Baltimore.
Being obviously modest as always, because she also has just the most extraordinary ear for dialect, and I, by the way, don't at all as an immigrant and as a person who just does not pick up on a lot of that. So a lot of times, we'll do this and say, that was such a good take, and no, but I didn't say, it
was always the and going.
Like, oh, really? I wouldn't hear. No, just one more for the
For you guys, what is the research process? I mean, you had this interactive Bible, you had your music that Alma was sending you. Are you actors who do you love to dig in and do tons of research and look into Baltimore history and
Yeah. We did a lot of dream work. I did a lot of
daydreaming and dream work as well. I watched documentaries on what it was like to be not only a black man in the 60s, but what it's like to be a cop in the 60s, and sort of in a way be sort of a pariah to the community. It was a bit of that, really. And the thing about it, we had this Bible, right, with all of this preparation and all this vision, and then we would show up to set, and I'm gonna be like, well, what do you think? And I think that collaborative nature was really like super special, because it's very rare when somebody's so genuinely interested in what you want to put, and your DNA can find its way into a project. And I think that was really special.
Yeah, can I just say to that point, I was actually talking about this today because someone was like, well, what do you feel like is special about Alma? And I was like, it's this thing where like a person can know that they are the absolute, right? But like to know that you're the absolute, but to know that someone else might have something to add to the pot that can make the thing, because everyone is on the same team. And I think that's a beautiful thing that Alma brings to the table, just like being welcoming. Like if you're in the room, you matter. And I mean, that's like everybody, like catering, janitorial, as it should be.
One of the guys that was doing the COVID support ended up getting a role, right?
And also everyone in the neighborhood, yes. Alma would invite to come sit next to her and watch the screen. That she had like a chair for people from the neighborhood,
like random
which was so
people,
beautiful.
guys, random people, almost just at the monitor. I'm like, who is that guy?
But it was beneficial to all of us because they are of the culture. They had once again, that DNA that just allowed us to see what it's really about.
Yeah,
And
it's like if
pride.
they know you're lying, then you better
There
like
you go.
act harder, you know?
Right. Or act less, you know. Yeah.
I do have to say that I've been very patient with that, and I remember 2 days specifically when Moses had to play with my masseuse a scene, and Natalie had to play a scene with my car salesman.
Yeah, that was cool.
But he was a car salesman.
He was perfect.
He was playing a car salesman.
He was perfect.
But yeah, it was. I do love doing that, and I do feel like it grounds things, and it also kind of reminds you of what's the vibe. And Ellen, obviously, who played a very big scene with a real air robber from Baltimore, where we kind of discovered during the research that there was an incredible amount of history about black air robbers in Baltimore, which are the folks that sell fruits and vegetables and flowers off of horse carts in neighborhoods. And there used to be about 600 stables in Baltimore. Now there's only 2 left. So we ended up writing it into it, and there was a very big scene. And I just said, well, why don't he play it? The real air robber. And he was such an incredible actor, actually. Yeah. Like, it was really really beautiful scene, and Ellen very much accommodated that wish, and also actually like humbly.
It was because of him that the scene ended up turning out decent. Because I went in there with this idea of what it was to be, and then almost was just like, I think he knows a little bit more about it than you do. And I was like, yeah, just from listening to him and his authenticity and his soul, it settled in a really nice way.
It's one of the things you do get though from filming in a place that this show takes place in, and I think that's been allowed to us to do because of really tax rebate, but that they agreed at the end that we shoot there. But that's what you get from being there and being with the people, which is really rare.
Well, the show was extraordinary. Lady in the Lake, 7 episodes, premieres July 19th, of course, on Apple TV+. The finale is August 23rd. I want to thank Alma Har'el, Natalie Portman, Moses Ingram, Noel, Byron Bowers, Josiah Cross. Thank you all so much.
Thank y'all.
Congratulations.
Thank y'all.